What's up and welcome back to another live stream with Gizmo Slip Tech. It's a glorious day. We have the $1499 MSi Katana 15 with an RTX 4070. Now, there are a number of compromises on this laptop that they had to make in order to get that price point down to $1499. We're going to go over all of the pros and the cons of this laptop today. We're going to be doing a flex test, a display test. We're going to take the bottom off of it. We're going to run a synthetic benchmarks. We're going to undervolt it. We're going to overclock it. We're going to test the keyboard. We're going to test the trackpad. We're going to do everything we can with this laptop to see if it's worth the money, worth the buy. This is going to be one of the most interesting laptops because of the controversial naming changes that NVIDIA did this year. We're going to go over whether the 4070 is a totally crappy buy or if it's at least a decent buy. It's one of the most controversial things because basically, at least the RTX 4080 was faster than the 3080 Ti. But in this scenario where we have the 4070, it's struggling to beat the 3070 Ti. And that's what's caused a lot of controversy and a lot of confusion. Real quick, before we get started or continue, I'm going to go over some of the most competitive laptops with the Katana 15. So there's going to be a few other options to consider, especially if you want something that has a better display and a slightly weaker GPU. We're going to talk about that, and it's a laptop I'm going to want to review here. It's the new Pulse 15. So we're going to start at, we could filter by 4070, but instead let's filter by price point. We're going to go down to $1,500 or less, okay? Here are all of the laptops with RTX 4050, 4060, 4070 that have a RTX 4000 series or newer, basically, all the new laptops for this year. So we've got the Pulse 15. I think this is the #1 competitor to the Katana 15 in my book. Let's pull this up. It's got a very similar build to it. It appears to be basically the same chassis, but it has a higher TDP on the GPU, and it also a 13th gen processor. And then if we pop over to Newegg here, you can see it actually comes with a QHD 165 hertz display. So the display is upgraded on this guy, but the big thing about the Pulse 15 is it is only an RTX 4060. So you go down a tier in GPU, but you go up in terms of display and processor. So in my mind, I'm thinking the Pulse 15 is probably the better buy. I don't know. That's my initial thought, but if you're really focusing more on just raw GPU potential, then maybe the 4070 in the Katana 15 will actually be the better buy, especially if you're going to use like an external monitor, so the display quality doesn't matter. And in that situation, then maybe the Katana 15 is the better buy. We don't know. We need to actually fully test it. And it's a little interesting to me that the Katana 15 has a lower TDP on the GPU, so at least supposedly. So here's the Katana 15 that we're looking at today. You can see I bought this from Newegg, and it was shipped, and this is in stock, currently available for order. So if you order this now, you could get it in a few days. But this thing only weighs 5 pounds, less than 5 pounds, extremely light, very portable. It's got a decent selection of ports, and it says only up to 105 watts is what it claims on the 4070, but it has the same chassis as the Pulse 15, but just with a different thermal design, I guess. I don't know. That's the other big thing. Maybe even the 4060 with 140 watt could actually beat the 4070 at 105 watt. That's what makes me... I'm leaning towards recommending the Pulse 15 in general, but then again, we need to do actual testing and see, right? That's the whole point. So, so those are the primary competitors. You also have the Acer Nitro 5 and the Dell G16. Both of these are also going to be coming out. There's no place to buy this, I believe, right now. This has a BH photo link, but I don't think it's in stock currently. But the Acer Nitro 5 with a 4070 and a Ryzen CPU is supposed to be $1499. That could be a better buy, potentially, maybe. The Aero 14 is another competitor right around this price point. The Zephyrus G16. This is another one I have ordered myself. I'll be reviewing it here soon. It's a full HD 165 hertz display with a 13th gen RTX 4060 120 watt. And it's going to be basically their bang for the buck, more portable, very direct competitor to the Katana. But the big thing is I'm hoping the display is going to be better quality on the Zephyrus G14 or G16. So those are probably the main 4 competitors: the Dell G16, Acer Nitro 5, the MSI Pulse 15, and the Zephyrus G16. Maybe the Strix G16 as well with the 4060. Here's that one. This is limited availability. You can order this right here, but it's not. Interesting. This one certainly has some potential. So we'll have to see. I'm very curious about how this Katana is going to stack up against the competition today. So let's go ahead and get this unboxing started. And I'm really curious about the performance, the testing, and the display, what the actual nits brightness is going to be, and the color gamut and all of that. So this came in a triple box package setup. This was the second layer. This is the third layer. There we go. All right. And the outside of this box has some nice MSI logoing with gaming laptop. I do like the box. The design of the box looks pretty cool. The inside of the box is pretty basic. It's got a cardboard protector. We've got a plastic wrap around the laptop. So here is the Katana. We're not going to do a detailed look at this just yet. Let's continue looking through the box. It did have a black plastic or a black microfiber-ish cloth. It's not actually microfiber. I don't know what this is exactly, but it helps prevent the screen and keyboard from rubbing against each other. Inside of here, we have our power cable. So here's the power brick. It's very small overall. It's like very reasonably sized, and it is a 240 watt power brick. So it's not a super high-end power brick. And inside of here, let's see what it comes with, all the pamphlets and stuff. Okay, so MSI says we are here to help. They have a helpline number. You'll want to write that down. You get a 12-month warranty, okay? Looks like it's just a typical 12-month warranty and does not include accidental drop protection. We also get a quick start guide. All right, so this just goes over the ports and what you need to do to be able to turn the laptop on. You do have to plug the power adapter in order to power on the laptop. So just keep that in mind, at least the very first time that you power it on. First thing we do, always first thing we do, we're gonna take the bottom of this guy off. I have not taken the bottom off, so this is gonna be an adventure. There we go. All right, so this laptop is very small, very compact overall. So this is a 16-inch blade. 16. The Blade 16 is just a little bit smaller. Obviously, the Blade is known for being extremely compact and small, and this 15.6-inch is just a little bit thicker and a little bit deeper. All right, so that's the Blade 16. MSI's M16. So you can see that the Katana 15 is much smaller than the M16. It's about the same thickness though. And here is the big mama jama, the Strix G18 right here. It is a big guy, and you can see how much smaller that Katana 15 is. It's much, much smaller. Last but not least, here is the Razer Blade 18. And you can see the Blade 18 is remarkably small for an 18-inch. But the Katana 15 is quite a bit smaller than even the Blade 18, so which makes sense. Taking the bottom off, let's go. Looks like we need a Phillips head screwdriver to take the bottom off. It'll be very interesting to see. You know, when I get the Pulse 15 and I can compare the Pulse 15's thermal solution to the Katana 15, I just really want to understand, like, why is the Katana supposedly a lower TDP on the GPU? I mean, is that actually a mistake? Because I think they have the same chassis, like the exact same chassis. Anyway, so I think I got all these screws out. Now I want to mention, so this is the katana. I have got my nice, I think this is the bonsai tree. I'm not sure exactly what kind of tree this is, but anyway, this shirt is awesome. It's from Into the AM, and there's a link in the description for 10% off on Into the AM. So if you want some high quality graphic t-shirts, go check them out. It does help support my channel, so thank you very much if you guys do use that link. I've been wearing this shirt for a couple years now, and it's still in really good condition. So yeah, I just advise you to machine wash it and then hang dry it. And the display and the t-shirt quality, the cut is all really, really great. Okay, so we're trying to get this to pop apart here, and there's no pop-up screw on this chassis, so we're gonna need to use, I think we're gonna use a pick, a guitar pick, to get this thing started. All right, so once it's started, now I'm gonna go ahead and use a little more of the prying tool here. There we go. I'm not sure exactly how the back comes up, so I'm gonna go around the front first. All right, so we got the entire front part, but the back so far is not lifting up. So yeah, just pushing forward a little bit got it to pop up. So I got all the front and sides, and then pushing backwards on the back of the fans, it just kind of popped right out of the back. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the thermals and upgradability of this katana. Shabam! Whoa, what is this? What is this blue thing? That is interesting. What the heck? It's like a structural support, I think, to help prevent flex in the chassis. I think that's what this is. I don't know. That's interesting. Maybe a graphene layer for cooling? Maybe. That's because there's this kind of this open air gap right here. Here we are looking at the inside. All right, so we have a 53.5 watt-hour battery, which is not that big. So you're going to be looking at probably 3-ish hours of web browsing with this thing. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on how well you optimize. So maybe up to like 4, maybe 5. Probably not 5. Probably more like 4 hours of web browsing if you do a good job optimizing. And then if you do really good job optimizing for office tasks, maybe you can get like 5 or 6 hours of battery life with this. But most likely, you're probably looking between like the 3 to 5 hour range, with the 3 hours being not that optimized, maybe even 2 hours not being that optimized. So don't expect too much with this small battery with this machine. All right, so I see a couple of M.2 slots. That looks like, okay, maybe it's just one. I think one additional M.2 here. Is that what this is? But it does not make sense. There's no place for it to receive, so that's a weird placement for that part right there. Can you guys see that? What do you guys think that is? That looks like an M.2 receiver. But yeah, I'm not seeing, like, could you lift this up? You can take that off, but there's no screw to mount the M.2. So you definitely want to keep that in there though, because that'll help prevent chassis flex. All right, so here's our SSD. Pyrite brand SSD? I have never heard of a Pyrite brand SSD, but it is a 1 terabyte SSD, which is awesome. And for our Wi-Fi, trying to get a look at that, it's an AX201, and it should be Wi-Fi 6 with Bluetooth 5.2, which is quite good. For our thermal design here, we have a 3-fan exhaust. So sorry, it's a 2-fan with 3 exhaust ports. So we have a double exhaust port on this one, and then another exhaust port over here. Our CPU has a hefty amount of heat pipes with 2 shared heat pipes, and well, actually that's all 4 of these are shared. 5. Yeah, all of these are shared, and none of them are dedicated. That means that the CPU actually might be able to go to a very high TDP on this chassis just based on the thermal design layout. Kind of impressive, actually. And you can undervolt the CPU, and I'm going to show you how to do that in this video later on the live stream here, so you can optimize your performance at least a little bit. Now, I have not tried undervolting it yet, but I did make sure that you could. Now, the GPU has 6 heat pipes. This is a nice thermal designed layout overall for a more of a budget-friendly chassis. I'm just curious why it's only 105 watt if this thermal design is so nice. Could it be more than 105? Maybe that's a typo. I don't know. Maybe it is just 105. I'm just curious. Why is it only 105? Okay, and then we have 2 SODIMM slots for our memory, 1 and 2, and it's 8 gigs, 2 8-gig sticks right here, and it is upgradable. You can swap these out right here. I don't want to deal with unplugging the battery, so I won't pull that out. But yeah, that's very nice overall. I like the layout. I don't really see a place where you could put a second SSD in here. It looks like you're just going to be limited to this one SSD unless you can figure out how to make this other M.2 port work. Like I said, I just don't see how they could mount a second one in here. Yeah, it's so weird they have this extra M.2 slot and there's just no way to mount the SSD. It's not terrible. It looks promising. I want to see the performance, you know? What's the actual performance on this machine like? And why did MSI limit it down to only 105 watts to the GPU? Okay, so I'm going to start with the back, get that locked down first, because that was the hardest part to get up. All right, and now we're going to go around the sides. Wow, the sides are easy to get back in. But you just want to make sure every single little plastic piece gets popped back together. All right, and I'm going to go around one more time just to make sure it all looks flush and nothing pops together. Looks good. All right, let's go ahead and get the screws back in. There are a lot of screws on this chassis. That is one downside to their setup. So I set up the screws in the same pattern right by the screw hole. That way every screw goes back into the same screw hole, because some of these screws are different lengths and sizes. The only downside to doing this is sometimes I'll like drop the laptop or something gets swept across the table and the screws go everywhere. So you got to be careful not to send the screws flying. And I want to note that there is a factory screw sticker, but your warranty should be covered as long as you don't actually damage the laptop. That is what the law, at least in the United States, is. That might vary from country to country, but... And there is also a hole right here on the bottom of the chassis. That should be for a CMOS reset if you need to reset the BIOS. So we're ready to flip this guy over, and I will power it on. It does have a really nice keyboard backlight, in my opinion, for this price point. And notice the WASD keys are translucent, and the arrow keys also have a little bit different design. And the keyboard layout itself is exactly the same as the MSI GT77, but this is a membrane keyboard, so it has a different feel. Now the power cable is like 6 feet long. It's a very long cable, and the power adapter cable is about 4 feet long. Okay, and the power. Well, let's go over the ports real quick. On the right side, we have our headset port, one USB-C 3.2 Gen 2, I believe. And then we have a so it's a USB-A 3.2, and then we have a USB-C with DisplayPort 1.4. So you can use this to output high-end displays like this display behind me. So this laptop can power high-end displays like 4K gaming monitors. And then we also have HDMI 2.1 right here, the high-end HDMI, which is nice, especially on a budget gaming laptop. Oftentimes the ports are sacrificed, and there are a couple compromises on this laptop. Then we have our Ethernet port. It's nothing amazing. I don't think it's a high-end Ethernet port, but yeah. So headset, USB 3.2, USB-C with 1.4 or DisplayPort 1.4, HDMI 2.1, and then I'm not sure if it's a 2.5 gig or just a gigabit Ethernet. All right, and then on the left side we have 2 more USB-As. One's a 3.2 and one's a USB 2.0. So this has a USB 2.0. If you're going to use this, you probably want to use it for like a mouse or a keyboard, something basic that doesn't need high speed. Okay, so notice that the actual port itself is black. The inside of it, that means it's the slower USB. All right. All right. So you can see the WASD keys here are translucent. They look they look pretty cool, actually, I think. Some people will love it, some people will hate it, okay? That's all I'll say about the keyboard. Translucent keys there. The whole keyboard is all backlit. It's a 4-zone RGB keyboard, so you can customize the light in 4 different intervals. And so you can have basically 4 colors on the whole keyboard at once. The default look is really good, I think. I like the way that it like gradually shifts from left to right. And the touchpad here is a plastic touchpad, I believe. And it's not that big. The click is all right. The click is all right. It's not that high end of a touchpad. It's more of a budgety touchpad. And if you get sweaty fingers a little bit, or a little, it can kind of catch your finger a little bit. It doesn't glide as smoothly as glass. That's the main downside to the plastic touchpad. But in terms of precision, it seems like it's a fairly precise touchpad, and it seems to work just fine for me in my initial using of the laptop when I'm installing everything. There is no Windows Hello. Okay, so there's no Windows Hello on this guy. That's another cost-cutting thing they did on this machine. There you can see the laptop displays brightness. I think we're at 100% brightness right now. We are. And I'm going to point out on the keyboard here, we've got a number pad over here, which is nice. This is the same layout as the GT75, which works just fine. It can be a little bit cramped feeling though, all right? So just know that it's not quite as nice of a layout as some of the number pads out there, but it's nice to have it. I love that they included it on a 15-inch laptop. That's very good. The arrow keys also have special functions. I can turn on a crosshair, pause play music, increase the fan mode, or turn off the display with the different arrow key secondary functions right here with the FN key. So that's pretty nice. You just have to do FN, that FN left arrow, and that'll pause play your music. FN middle arrow, and that'll put on your crosshair. And you want to see what the crosshair looks like? That's what the crosshair looks like right there. So it's kind of hard to see it probably right now, but I'll turn it off and on a couple times, and you'll be able to see it. You can customize the crosshair in the software after the fact. So it's just nice in first-person shooters or different adventure type games. If you need, it makes it a little easier to aim sometimes, especially if everything's really chaotic on the screen. So going around, it's fairly firm, a little bit of flex, a decent amount of flex right here by the touchpad. Not much flex on the left side. A little bit of flex over here. A good amount of flex up here at the top. It's definitely pretty bendy up there. A little bit of bend over here on the right side. And this is, I believe, an entirely plastic chassis, including the top lid, okay? Coming through the middle here, definitely some bend to this chassis. I would say moderately bendy. Yep. I mean, you get what you pay for. It's one of the ways in which they save money. Not having to reinforce or design the chassis to be as rigid. And definitely some keyboard flex around the keyboard area. It's to be expected in this price point. Very rarely are you going to get something super rigid for under $1,500. That's just the reality. Sometimes you can, but not very often. Next up, we have the display test. Should we do the display test next? Let's do the display test. And I can tell you right now that if you are picky on your displays, you probably aren't going to want to get this laptop, all right? If you want something that's 500 nits, super contrasty, and is 100%, P3 color gamut or something, this is not the laptop for you. I can already tell you that much. So, display analysis. So this is what we're about to do. Check the color gamut and the brightness and contrast of this laptop display. So, and I also want to point out, this thing can lay back all the way, be flat on a desk. That's kind of unique. Not very many laptops can do that. That's kind of cool, huh? So here's the color display. We've got to put this guy down here. Make sure the display brightness is all the way up. It is. There we go. We're measuring now. All right, so we got to set the brightness down to 0. It does get very dim at 0 brightness. That's good, I guess, if you're going to use the laptop at night. And this keyboard backlight does look really good at night. It looks pretty good all the time pretty much, but it is going to look especially gorgeous at night. So, okay, so let's take a look at the results and then we'll test the hinges. Okay, so we got 61% of sRGB, which is not that vibrant of a display. 46% of Adobe RGB, 45% of P3 color gamut. Brightness goes all the way down to 11 nits brightness at the low end, and 230 nits brightness at the high end. Not a very bright or vibrant display. If you're going to use this outdoors, you're going to basically not be able to see the display very well. And if you're going to be indoors, you'll be able to see it all right, but the colors are not going to be that poppy. The contrast ratio is decent at 930:1. So that's about the only thing this display has got going for it in like a majorly positive way. So as I iterated at the beginning of this live stream, the number one reason to buy this laptop is not because of the display. The display is definitely one of the compromises that MSI went through to be able to sell this RTX 4070 laptop to you at $1499. All right. And if you want a laptop that's very similar to this with a better display, go for the Pulse 15, the MSI Pulse 15, which is basically the same laptop almost, but with a QHD display with an RTX 4060 instead of a 4070 at the same price. Let's take a look at the webcam here. So the webcam is like, I think it's a 720p webcam. The speakers on this also were not that special. This will obviously work for a Skype call, but it's not going to be very high quality. It's very grainy, not very much detail in the hair. If you keep the window small, it's going to be a little harder to notice the graininess of it, but yeah. I mean, the webcam will work in a pinch. That's basically my summary of the webcam. But it's your typical meh overall webcam. So when you set this up, you're going to have a few different modes that you can select from. You can do super battery mode to increase your battery life. You'll want to use that if you're going to try to, I don't know, type Word documents or take notes in like college classes or something. Silent mode is going to prevent the laptop from making as much noise by throttling everything down, reducing the power to the GPU and CPU. Balanced mode is going to cause some fan noise, but not maximum fan noise, and give you reasonable performance. At least that's what it's supposed to be. Extreme performance is going to ramp those fans very high, and you can hear them already coming on. And you can go into extreme performance mode, and you can activate maximum cooler boost fans as well. You can leave them on auto, so that way they're quiet unless the laptop's under load. So now I switched them back to auto. But if I go back to cooler boost, it's going to go to maximum fan. So here's the sound of the fans. We're going to go ahead and let this kick on so you guys can hear how loud it is. It's actually not that loud. So we're about 10 inches in front of the laptop. Let's go ahead and turn it on. So there you go. The fans are definitely on the quieter side. That's nice, right? You want the fans to be on the quieter side. It makes sense. This is not some extremely high level of performance, and it's not a very high TDP. So that's one nice advantage. The fans don't have to be as crazy. Yeah, they're not quiet fans. They're not very loud, though. Like, I've been listening to the GT77 and the Strix G18 and the MSI or the Alienware M16. Those laptop fans are much louder than this one. When you're comparing max fans to max fans. So overall, this one's not really that bad. So Cinebench R23, this is a benchmark that's designed to test the rendering performance of the CPU. So we're going to do we're in extreme performance mode. We're going to do a one single run first to see what we get. Well, we'll do a series of a few runs. All right. So I always raise the back of the laptop up about a ½ inch in all of my tests. So that way it's fair for every laptop that I test. So we got 11,683 for our single run. Let's run it again. So we got 11,127. Let's go ahead and do a 10-minute test. This is what we're going to use on my gaming laptop list. Checking out this list right here. So this laptop list is a way for you to check out benchmarks as well as check out and compare all kinds of stats for different laptops. You can see the weight, you can filter by display size, and you can do all kinds of things. You can sort by rating, So you can like say, oh, I only want laptops up to $2,000 and that they weigh less than 5 pounds, for example. And that'll give you lightweight portable laptops only. So we have an i7-12650H. All right, so that's the CPU here. That is 6 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. You can see the clocks here for all 10 cores. We're gonna see what this runs at and what temperature it hits and all of that during this 10-minute test. So let's go ahead and get that started. Down here, we're pulling 97 watts on the CPU, 100 watts on the CPU right now, 99 watts. That's a good amount of wattage. 83 watts. You know, we've got all of those heat pipes going to that one CPU, shared through that one CPU. So it makes sense that it's able to pull that kind of crazy high wattage. The clock speed on all of these cores is really not that high though, only 2.7, 2.8. You know, it is a 12th gen CPU, but yeah. Oh, interesting. Wow, our package power is down to only 43. And our temperatures on this CPU are so much lower. Do you see that? We're only at 53 degrees on the CPU right now. 53 and 58, now 58 on average. That is so cool. But the thing is, it's a low power limit. So if you want to maximize the performance of the CPU, you're definitely going to try to raise the power limits up to probably 90 or 100 or somewhere in that ballpark, because it was running fine at that level of power limit. And that would let the CPU clocks go much higher, get much better performance. So right now we're averaging 2.8 gigahertz on our CPU, which is just really low. And it's because of this package power being really low, only 48 watts. The temperatures are excellent though, but it shows that we could definitely push the performance of this laptop a lot harder than we are currently pushing it. All right, so here is the Hinge. All right, I'm gonna hold it here. You can see it's a little bit wobbly. As far as being able to tell if it's gonna come apart on you or not, that's very difficult to know. But the Hinge design itself doesn't seem like it's likely to fail. But I do agree, MSI that's one area where they can improve their design sometimes or work on improving their brand. I actually had a Hinge fail me on one MSI laptop a few years ago. So I have definitely had that happen. Overall, I do like, I don't know if I like the hinges. I would just say that they're just normal hinges. There's no weakness here that I can tell. It looks fine as best I can tell. If you're worried about the hinges breaking, the best thing I can do is say to try to get yourself an extended warranty that lasts 2 or 3 years. If the hinges are likely to break anytime soon, it's probably going to break in that next 2 or 3 years. In general, I do recommend buying external warranties from good sources if you can. Just because if you don't want to risk your laptop breaking, getting an external warranty can be good. I have used the third-party warranties a couple times, and it's definitely helped me out a couple times. So here is the 10-minute Timespy, or the 10-minute Cinebench score for out of the box. Let's see what we get. I'm really curious. Notice our average TDP was 48 watts for this 10-minute run. We're gonna try to optimize this score and see what we can get. I bet you we can almost, I don't know if we can double the score. Probably not double the score, but we can probably get at least a 50% gain is my prediction right now. I bet we're gonna get 50% higher when I modified and tune this CPU to run faster. Okay, so we got 10,874 points for Cinebench R23. Let's see if we can get at least 16,000 after we tune the CPU. I don't know if we will. So I have not installed anything, and I've not undervolted anything, and I have not raised the power limits on anything. I'm going to try to use Intel XTU to raise the power limits on this laptop. I'm going to go ahead and shut down now, and we're going to go into the BIOS, and we're going to see if we can undervolt this thing. So to go into the BIOS, you're going to need to press the delete key. So I'm tapping the delete key. Right as the MSI logo pops up, you need to be pressing the delete key over and over. All right, and when you're in the BIOS, you need to activate advanced mode, Alt, right control. So it's left Alt, right control, right shift, and then F2. That unlocks the advanced mode in the BIOS. And when you're in here, you definitely want to be careful not to turn anything off and on that you should not be turning off and on, okay? All right, so we're going down to the overclocking performance menu right here. We're gonna hit enter. We're gonna enable overclocking. We're going to disable undervolt protection. All right, and then on the processor, we're going to undervolt. I don't know how much to undervolt on this kind of CPU. I'm thinking probably around 100 should probably be stable. Maybe not though, because it's only a 10-core CPU. This might be too strong of an undervolt. We're going to go 100 and see if it's stable. All right. So this is the P cores. Undervolt is minus 100. Notice I changed it from plus to minus. So I put 100 and then I put minus. And then we're going to go to our E cores. And we're going to do an offset of 50. Again, you have to make it a minus. Very important, you make it a minus. For our ring, we're going to do 50 for our ring. We're going to see if this is stable. This is my first time undervolting this thing, okay? So those are the three things I'm changing is P cores under processor, E cores, cache, and then our ring cache, which is basically our processor cache. Those three things are now undervolted. And let's see if we're stable. So it says the short power limit boost is to 200 watts. That's not true. Core voltage offset is locked down. It is. So this is no undervolting available in this Intel XTU. Interesting. All right. So for the short-term power boost, let's just try changing this and applying it and seeing if that can at least let Cinebench R23 run at a higher level of performance or not. We're continuing our exploration to see if we can somehow boost the CPU performance on this machine. It's pulling 119 watts right now. Oh yeah, it looks like our power limits are being applied, but we are reaching thermal throttling. So, I mean, our clock speeds are so much faster now, but we are reaching higher temps. Okay, the temps are coming down a little bit. I'm just curious if the package power is going to keep maintaining this high, 100 watts or not. It looks like it's set to throttle at 95 degrees, by the way. So far, our package power is staying up at 100. If you want to tune this to put out a high level of CPU performance, you may not be able to undervolt it to get maximum performance, but this should still be a dramatically faster 10-minute score. It's just going to be pushing the limits of your thermal this thermal laptop. So we're doing 80 watts now. We're not quite going as hard as we were. I think 80 watts is probably the right place for this CPU to be at. You're not going to be maxing your thermals. You know, at 80 watts, you're going to be hitting a high enough clock speed. Your temperatures on your CPU are going to be below 90. They're going to be in the 80s, which is much better. That's a much better balance, I think, for long-term viability. That said, Intel says the CPU temps can go all the way to 100 without damaging them. That's probably true. I don't have any evidence to indicate otherwise, but I do prefer my CPU temps not to be hitting that thermal limit. I just prefer that. So if this was my laptop, I'd probably set it to an 80 watt power limit in Intel XTU and just keep it there. I don't know. Especially if you're running max fans, that should be fine. So far in this 10-minute test, we've averaged 4.1 to 4.3 on the P cores, 3.5 gigahertz on the E cores on average. Now, our actual clock speeds now are only about 3.9, which are still much better. Before they were at like, what, 2.5, 2.6 stock out of the box tuning. Now they're jumping up to 4.1 again. Doing 84 watts on average. Our averages are not accurate. They're not updating for some reason. Let me reset it. Okay, so I'm just doing a reset. This is going to be only for the second half of the time. Overall, I think this is just about perfect. 85 watts. We're getting to that 90 degrees on the CPU package, 83 degrees on the core, and we're pulling 4.1 gigahertz on the mains, 3.5 on the E-cores. That's phenomenal. That is phenomenal for this laptop chassis. I think we would be able to do a little better if we were able to undervolt. We'd probably be doing another 0.1 or 0.2 gigahertz more across all the cores if we were able to be undervolting this guy right now. Our averages in the second half of the Cinebench R23 run has been 3.8 to 3.9 gigahertz, though the P-Core 0 has been 3.66. Other ones are 3.88. And our E-Core averages have been 3.0. Still much better than the first time. Okay, so we ended up with 14,347. That is not as high as I was hoping, simply because our undervolt was not applied. Currently, our undervolt did not apply. Let me go ahead and just make sure that our undervolt settings are still active. But that said, 14,000, what was it, 14,300 or something? That's still a 40% bump, or approximately 35 to 40% bump in performance compared to stock settings. And then if you were to throw the undervolt in there, if we can get this thing to undervolt, that's where we get another 10% performance bump. So popping over into the BIOS again, pressing the delete key. All right, we're back into the BIOS. Let's just make sure that our settings were saved. Like I said, I'm guessing it's not going to take. The BIOS must be locked down in some way. Here, I don't know. Let me try turning off Intel virtualization here. So let's check our undervolts again. We have overclocking enabled, undervolting disabled. P-Core, it's in here. The offset is here. It's just not being applied. They must not be allowing it. MSI must not be allowing it, unfortunately. That's too bad. No undervolting, as far as I can tell, unless throttle stop lets it happen. So notice that when you're using throttle stop, you really do not want to be utilizing Intel XTU at the same time. You're not going to be able to modify everything that's in here, simply because sometimes the BIOS is not going to let you modify anything, or if the throttle stop is not compatible. But I believe this is typically where you would be modifying. What we would want to do is apply an offset voltage here. It's all grayed out. So even throttle stop is not letting us do anything. So that means that, yeah, it's not gonna, it's still grayed out even in throttle stop, unfortunately. I don't believe, unless I'm just not remembering correctly, but I believe if we were able to use throttle stop, this would be unlocked right here. We would check this box right here, and then we would take our offset voltage and slide that over. Yeah, we're not gonna be able to use throttle stop. Throttle stop's a pretty sweet application if you end up with a laptop that has it unlocked. But for now, my recommendation is to use Intel XTU, raise the power limit to about 85, and you're going to get so much better CPU performance. And that level of CPU performance we got, 14,000 in Cinebench R23. My laptop over here, it gets about 15,000. And this was a $3,400 laptop only a couple years ago. Right, so that's a Legion 7i with an i9 11980HK, and that sucker gets like 15,000. And so this machine with raised power limits almost as high, at half the price of what I paid for that machine. So we're doing 5 games, and then we're going to do Timespy at the end. So the 5 games we're going to do is God of War, Hogwarts, Cyberpunk 2077, Apex Legends, Red Dead Redemption 2. Everything is set to ultra. We're cranked to maximum settings. In God of War, we are 1080p DLSS on quality. All right, that's what we're doing our first test with. Notice our GPU is sitting at 85 watts. Our CPU is sitting at 41 watts. So that's our current combined GPU load, about 120 to 130 watts, which is not super high. Not super high. I expect the Pulse 15 would be at least doing 115 watts as a base here. I love the temperatures, though. We're only 66 degrees on the GPU, 72, 75 on the CPU. The temps in this right now are phenomenal. And we're hitting high GPU utilization, which is great. We're not being CPU bound.
Tracks. Not deer though. I'll keep looking.
All right, so we ended up with 7634. And I can tell right now, I am getting just a little bit of ghosting on the display. When I move the display quickly, left to right, that's going to impact your esports gaming and fast response rate gaming pretty noticeably. So 7634 for our initial run. We'll try without DLSS and ensure that it was very, very smooth gameplay. So without DLSS, we're hitting 66 FPS. That's pretty dang good. Especially for all ultra settings. Like, you could obviously down some of these settings and hit way higher FPS. At 1080p, DLSS doesn't really get us that much, right? DLSS really helps us more at QHD and 4K resolutions. 68 FPS, 46 for our 1% lows. Let's try DLSS on ultra. No, let's do just performance. Just for fun. See what kind of FPS we get with performance. Wow, it's not that much different. It's like the same almost as DLSS on or off. You definitely don't want to play with performance at 1080p. That's a bad idea. You maybe upscale a bit better when you're doing... You'd probably want to just do quality or just turn it off entirely at 1080p. All right. So overall, obviously going to be very playable for God of War. And it's going to be very good FPS. Okay, so our frame rate is set to uncapped. DLSS is on quality. Frame generation is enabled. All right. Our settings are on ultra with ray tracing enabled. Okay. Everything's turned on. Everything's turned on, including DLSS and frame generation. So our VRAM is at 7.5 gigs. Our 1% lows are actually not doing too bad. Well, we're just going to see what kind of FPS we get in this. We did get a 1% starter that was pretty low there. I'm going to turn the sound all the way up for the speakers here. And let you guys kind of listen to them. I'm going to hold the mic.
You could get to the job when they came to Hogsmeade. That all you needed was a distraction. I gave you a distraction. Okay,
so I want to point out, this is playing really well, by the way. I'm impressed. We are maxing our regular RAM. We have 16 gigs of RAM. We're at 15.8 right here. And then our VRAM is also maxed at 7.2. That's pretty much maxed because you got to have a little bit of wiggle room there. But the performance is still doing okay. Hitting 83 FPS. And it's not stuttering too much, actually. And the temperatures are pretty dang good. 65 degrees, 73 degrees. I'm impressed. I just think that we would probably get higher FPS just if we had higher power limits. That's the only thing that I'm like, I wish we had higher power limits, but if the power limits were higher, the problem is we would end up with higher temperatures. We would get higher performance too. So these moderate levels of power limits here, it's just cranking out some good FPS considering everything is turned to max right now on the settings. Still providing a very playable experience. Our 1% lows are surprisingly good. It's much better than I was expecting. This should be averaging. Maybe it's not active anymore. I'm going to start a new average here. So, I mean, if you're looking for, if you want a 1080p laptop that plays Hogwarts fine, this is going to do all right. Let's try this run. We're at 1080p right now, but let's go ahead and this is one of the benchmarking runs that we do for the game. Running through here. I think the Hogwarts Legacy released a few patches actually since the game came out. And I think the optimization has gotten better over time. So at 1080p, everything on ultra, ray tracing enabled, frame generation on, 109.22. Let's try taking off. I mean, there's no reason why you would do this, in my opinion, but we're going to take off DLSS and turn off frame generation. Yeah, frame generation it's like, I can see such a difference in smoothness enabling DLSS and frame generation. We did more than double the FPS with those two things enabled here, right? I mean, that's such a big difference. Average has been engaged. We're running. So we got 4521. And what did we get? 112? It's not quite triple the performance with frame generation, but it's a big difference. If you want to play with ray tracing enabled, you pretty much want to have frame generation. No frame generation, DLSS on quality. You'll see the FPS. It's not going to be that much. Like, and I'm sure you can visually see the stutteriness of this, right? Comparatively speaking. So we were doing 35, now we're doing about 65. All right, let's go ahead and run through this. Our 1% lows are stuttering a bit. Okay, so here we are in Cyberpunk 2077. Let's try everything on Ultra. Okay, so we're going to turn on frame generation, DLSS on quality. Ray tracing is set to Ultra. Once again, our VRAM is being maxed out. Not as future-proof, guys, just pointing that out again. Not as future-proof because the VRAM is being maxed out. Our frames per second is obviously very playable. Everything's on Ultra here. Ray tracing enabled. DLSS is on quality. Frame generation is on 100 FPS in Cyberpunk. That's pretty good for $1,500, I think. That's my initial, at least in terms of performance potential. That's pretty good. I haven't seen how this stacks up against all the competition out there, but if you're looking for a quality gameplay experience, 100 FPS is dang good for $1,500 in Cyberpunk. Everything on Ultra, but you got to be okay with a 1080p experience, and you got to be okay with this lower display quality or using an external monitor. Okay, average FPS was 109.56. Minimum was 38.9. So obviously very, very good performance. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our average for this section. I just started the frame rate. We're at 109. This is very smooth, good gameplay. I can kind of tell there's a slight delay to this display. This display is not the optimal esports display. I don't have any health kits. Why don't I have any health kits? Yeah. I'm almost dead. I need to find a health kit. You guys got any health kits over here? Oh my goodness, I'm about to die. Okay. Boom. We were able to defeat all these guys without any med kits. That's good. All right, so this is obviously playing really good. And for 1080p gaming, this is going to work really well. Okay, so we're at 1080p. We're at full screen. We do not want VSync enabled. Everything to maximum settings. We're going to apply our changes. Yeah, so this is going to be Red Dead Redemption at 1080p. We are going to be seeing what kind of frame rate we get with this RTX 4070. No DLSS. No DLSS. Just raw, no ray tracing. But a 4080 is obviously going to be a big upgrade. That's going to be very noticeable, especially at QHD. Even at 1080p, it'll be noticeable. But yeah, there is a pretty sizable jump between 4070 and 4080 in this generation. Is Gigabyte a brand that you would recommend? I have owned a number of Gigabyte-made laptops. I've owned Aorus, or basically Gigabyte makes Aorus laptops. And I have had no problems with my Aorus laptops. They have been workhorses. My buddy bought my Aorus X7, and he is still using it. And it's like 6 years old now. Still, it's got a GTX 1080 in it. Still a great laptop. So I would say that Aorus is a good brand. Gigabyte is a bit more budget oriented on their laptops lately. Not necessarily the Aero. The Gigabyte G5 and G7, those are more budget oriented. And I would recommend them for their money typically. I have reviewed them in the past. There's a redesign this year for the Gigabyte G5, and I have not got the hands on it yet, but I have it coming in the mail. So be expecting it. Be expecting a live unboxing comparison with this guy. So I'm expecting it to be a good value and decent performance. Is QHD that much more noticeable on a 16-inch screen? It depends on how good your eyesight is. I do think it is noticeable for me. I especially like the additional real estate for editing videos and browsing web pages that QHD gives you. But you'd have to have good eyesight to be able to have it be very noticeable. Is the 1080 Ti holding up well till now? I think it is, as long as you're willing to turn down the graphics to like medium or low. Or if you're just sticking to 1080p gaming still, a 1080 is still reasonable. Like my buddy plays Apex with me on his GTX 1080, and it still cranks over 144 FPS on that laptop, and that's how fast his display is. So that's all he really needs. So in Red Dead Redemption right now, we're pulling the 76 FPS, 27 FPS for our 1% lows. We're doing 75 to 85 watts of GPU power, over 2100 megahertz on the GPU clock, which is good but not great. We'll definitely see higher GPU clock speeds on higher TDP laptops. And that'll translate into higher wattages, like up to like 130, 125, 140 watts on the GPU. And that's going to give us more FPS. This is definitely leaving some FPS on the table that the 4070 would be able to push out. That said, this gameplay is obviously perfectly fine. It's going to be very smooth at 76 FPS with a 28 FPS 1% low. So Red Dead 2 is going to be another winner for this laptop, at least at 1080p. If you like a MacBook Pro Retina screen on a laptop, which PC laptop would you want to get? You'd want to get at least a QHD in a 16-inch chassis, but you might even consider going for a 4K, like 17-inch one. Okay, so we got 74.6 average FPS in Red Dead 2 at 1080p. Very nice. All right, so let's hop into the firing range first. Oh, we're set to 144 FPS cap right now. We want to try to bypass that to see what this can get. And we probably don't even need to set all these settings down to low, but we might as well. So here is Apex Legends in the shooting range. I'm going to start the average FPS recording now. I don't know if you can tell, chat, but I am definitely seeing a bit of ghosting on the display. And it makes it a little bit harder to aim. It's not terrible, though. Like, it's not such a horrible response rate that you just can't play esports games. But the ghosting is a bit distracting. Like, if you got a lot going on your screen, the ghosting will make it a little harder to aim. And let me show you guys also what this looks like with the crosshair enabled in the settings here. So I'm going to go and flip that on. There's the crosshair. And for video, we'll probably have to do borderless window to be able to see our crosshair. So there's our crosshair. It's causing a glitch where the mouse comes up. Okay, so that is definitely a bit bugged. They need to work on their crosshair, guys. Let's go ahead and hop into a deathmatch. Let's see if we can kill anybody. I'm anticipating we'll be able to do some damage. Oh, no. Oh, yes, we survived. How did we survive that long? That's crazy. So the sound's pretty good, actually, like in terms of hearing the gameplay. It's not very spatially aware, though. Like, I mean, I can hear that it's on the right side just a little bit, but it's not super noticeable. Wow, we didn't die to that. Oh, we died to that guy, though. I'm trying to find who's shooting at me over here. I can't really tell where people are because I don't have good ears right now. We are going to die. This is clearly a great performer putting out great FPS. So if you wanted to play esports games with this, with an external full HD 240 hertz display, I think it would be a great option for you. The internal display, though, is not that great. Really, if you get this laptop, I'm going to be recommending a lot of people to be getting the getting an external monitor. If you want better color gamut and no ghosting. If you're just doing casual games, this is going to be great though. Timespy, no demo. Everything is stock. No overclocking. And then we're going to do some overclocking for Timespy. Okay, we're going to see what we can push this thing up to. I have no idea. I've not done an overclock on a 4070 yet. This is the first time running Timespy on a 4070 for me. I have not tested this. I'm anticipating a score between 11 and 13,000, maybe 14,000. I think it's going to be closer to the 11 and a half. If I were to guess, I'm guessing 11 and a half. Wow. Our temps are really, really good. I'm really surprised, though, that we're not pushing more than 85 watts to the GPU. And in my opinion, it's a little bit misleading to say that this is a 105 watt GPU if you can't hit 105 in Timespy. I would really say this is an 85 watt because we have not seen it push above that. That's one downside, I guess you could say. That said, the performance we're seeing at 85 is surprisingly good. Not necessarily in comparison to other laptops out there, but just like in general, if you're looking for a 1080p gaming laptop, you're going to be able to play 1080p games really well with the laptop GPU that's in this laptop. Does that make sense? Like you pick literally any game, you run it at 1080p resolution. We've seen flawless performance in every game we've ran, even in really demanding games like Hogwarts, with everything on maximum. If you start going up to QHD, I'm pretty sure the VRAM is going to start limiting you a lot more. So our CPU going all the way up to 95 watts or 85 degrees. It went up to 95 for a moment, but so you definitely, I think, would get thermally limited in this heavily CPU bound game like that. Okay, so we got, wow, my guess was almost exactly on point. 11,301. Just roughly comparing this, right? This is pretty similar to what a bottlenecked 3080 would do, like a little bit lower TDP 3080 would do. A higher end 3070, a bottlenecked 3070 Ti could hit around this point, but a 3070 Ti could definitely score higher than this. Really, it's going to come down to if you're comparing this against a 3070 Ti in terms of raw graphics potential, you're going to get about the same as a similar TDP 3070 Ti in that ballpark, or 3070, a high TDP 3070. For 1080p gaming, it's going to be fantastic. Just like with a 3070 Ti, 1080p gaming is fantastic. The place where this is going to really excel is going to be your frame generation games, which is not all the games out there, though. That's right. You're going to get that 50%, maybe 100% FPS boost using frame gen. And that is going to make a big difference in games like Hogwarts. We saw it make a big difference. But not all games have that. Okay, so we're going to try overclocking. Let's go. We're just going to start at 200. And we're going to start at 700 for our memory. It's a bit aggressive as our starting, but if we see instability, we'll adjust. We're going to test our overclock right now. Okay, wow. Our GPU overclock, we put 200 in there, and it went up about 200 higher on the clock. We were doing about 2,000 something, a little over 2,000, and now we're doing between 2160 and 2250. So our GPU overclock is definitely applied, and it's doing really well so far. Yeah, Niebuhr, I agree. This should have been labeled an RTX 4060. But NVIDIA went with their whole naming scheme. I did a detailed explanation of my thoughts on this earlier in the live stream. I don't know, about 20 minutes into the live stream if you want to hear my thoughts. But this is the third tier GPU, and it's really a successor to the RTX 3060. And it's priced to be a successor to the 3060. You know, when the 3060 launched, it was $1,500. At least in the majority of chassis. In the cheapest chassis, I think it was 1,000. But that was like very, very low watts. And there was only like in the GF63 or something. So with inflation, factoring in inflation, to me, this is an RTX 3060 successor. And when you're comparing performance, that's the GPU I would really be comparing it with. But NVIDIA did the whole naming scheme shenanigans. So it also makes sense to compare it to a 3070 or 3070 Ti just because of it's carrying on the same name. And it's going to be confusing, very confusing, and very easy for consumers to be misled, which just sucks. I hate that. It's going to be better when they go to the 5000 series. You know, when we're comparing a 4070 to a 5070 in 2 years, it's going to make way more sense. All right, so we're going to jump this up to 250 on the core clock and see if we run into any instability. I don't know if we're going to even see any increased clock speed up here. Right now, we're already not really seeing much clock speed increase. Okay, so we almost saw 2300 there for a moment, but in general, we're already running into limiting factors for our GPU overclock. Our temps are awesome, though. I gotta say, this cooler boost is really keeping these CPU and GPU temps in check. I'm gonna try upping the memory. I'm gonna add 200 to 900, see if we run into instability. I definitely, if you could try to revise the VBIOS and push this up to the 105 watt limit that it's supposed to be advertised at, you would see a noticeable bump in performance, and the temperatures would still be really good. And so this interface right here is going to let us modify the core clock target rate, but it may not actually work. Once you get beyond a certain point, if there's not voltage to actually boost the clock high enough, it's not going to go higher than the target, what you set in here. And by setting it too high, you're just going to get diminishing returns. So most of the RTX 4000 series laptops I've tested with overclock so far, the diminishing returns start at about 200 on the GPU clock and 900 or 1000 on the memory clock. I don't know. We're seeing some stability. I believe we're stable here. We have good temperatures. Let's go ahead and try rerunning Timespy and seeing what we get with this overclock. I think we'll see probably a 500 to 1000 point gain. I don't know, somewhere probably like 500 point gain. So maybe we'll get close to 12K. Okay, so we got 11,819 for our graphics score. So not quite 12,000. Still very good overall in my opinion. Now, before I need to do a speaker test, and then I also want to test QHD gaming on my projector. Here we go. And here we go. I'm going to restart it. This is Half-Life. This is Half-Life by Faded Aeon. All right, and this is La 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 by Deuce Williams.
I love you like la 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 la. I love you like la 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 la. I love you like la 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 la.
Okay, so this has two 2-watt speakers. The mids are there. The bass is very minimal. The highs are there, but they're kind of broken up. They're not very high quality. The speakers on this are budget, as is the price tag, as pretty much as expected. It'll work in a pinch if you need to watch a YouTube video. It'll work fine. The volume is not super loud, but it's there. If you're in a quiet room, you'll clearly hear your audio, which is really kind of what you're shooting for in the budget range, right? It's pretty rare you're going to get really good speakers at this price point. Okay, so there's a speaker test. Now let's hook this thing up to my projector and do some QHD benchmarks. So we're in QHD. DLSS is on quality. Everything else should still be on ultra. Everything else is on ultra. So this is the kind of performance you can get on QHD Plus 16 by 10. All right, here we go.
What did you find?
Tracks. Not doing that. I'll keep looking.
All right, so we got 6633 for our God of War. All right, so checking our settings. Want to make sure we're bumped up to the correct setting. Or not. But yeah, it's, oh, I need to probably turn down. That'll probably make that probably makes it look a lot better. The projector, I had the camera exposure set too high. So this is our QHD Plus, frame gen, DLSS on quality, ray tracing ultra, everything else on ultra. I should have had my average running during that whole time, but I did not. Oh well. Okay, so 73 FPS on average, 32 for the min. And for this test with the Scar 18 4090, I think we were getting 116. The Blade 18 got 120. The Strix G18 got 102, I believe. Between this one and the Strix G18, it's a 29 FPS increase, which is a pretty substantial increase to performance. I can see why people would be very happy with this. Okay, so 2560 by 1600 resolution. All right, we want no VSync, everything set to ultra. But if you're just wanting to get the best overall experience, and so your hobby like me, or like I'm an enthusiast, I love this stuff, and so I want the best, you know. And it's not so much about me maximizing my performance per dollar anymore. It's more about just maximizing my enjoyment of the product and being able to do everything that I do as quickly and as efficiently as I can, because I do edit tons of videos and use these laptops to the max. So it's okay. Lost way more in stock market. Lull to optimal spending. Kind of hard to resist. Mark says, I just break my old one and the warranty covers it. LOL. 1,200 pounds for a Razer 14 RTX 3080. Is that a good deal? Maybe. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good deal, actually. As long as the laptop's in good condition, that would probably be a pretty... I'm guessing it's used. Is that used? New? Unboxed? What is that? If it's used, that's just an okay deal. That's a good deal if it's used. It's an excellent deal if it's brand new. Yeah, and the other reason why the projector is kind of a little bit washed out is because I have all these studio lights in here and my RGB lighting. If I turn all my lights off, you'll see the projector, it will be way more colorful and vibrant with the lights off. So we're hitting 60 FPS here, QHD, ultra settings, very playable. Like all of these games have been playable with this $1,500 RTX 4070. It's pretty impressive, actually, I think. When you factor in everything, especially if you're going to use an external monitor with this laptop, you're going to really get a lot of mileage out of the hardware you're getting for $1,500. But if you're at all picky about the display on the internal laptop display, then don't buy this one, I would say. Go with the MSI Pulse 15. That's kind of my summary. I'm waiting for AMD CPUs to compare price differences. Yeah, that's a good idea, because these AMD CPUs could be underperform or outperform our expectations by a lot, right? I personally don't like Alienware laptops. They look good, but they are always bad performance in the past for price. I think the price to performance ratio on Alienware laptops are a lot better this year than previous generation. I don't know, like they're actually priced pretty reasonably, I think, overall, and more competitively. But they are a little bit on the pricier side still, even. So we're averaging 58 FPS so far in this section. M16 thermals are good. Yeah, they are good just as long as you don't let the power limit go crazy like I was letting the power limit go crazy. 57.3 FPS, QHD Ultra settings, no DLSS. Impressive. So the MSI Pulse 15 is, I think, arguably the best comparison or best competitor against this laptop because it has the QHD. It's basically this laptop with higher power limits and with a QHD screen. That's pretty compelling to me, given this overall product. I like the keyboard. The touchpad's plastic. It feels pretty good, though. I like that this comes with 16 gigs of DDR5 4000 megahertz memory, which is good. We did run into memory. We did cap out the memory in the Hogwarts, but the thermals on this were very good. The temperatures were very good, but the TDP limits were not that high, but we were still getting playable frame rates, especially at 1080p. It was great. In QHD resolutions, we were still getting playable frame rates in the 3 games that we tested. So if you do have a QHD external display, this is still going to push good frame rates out to that display, but you might run into VRAM limitations more easily at 4K or QHD. This looks relatively sleek. Yes, this is very sleek. It weighs only 4.9 pounds. So it is very thin and very light. It's less than an inch thick and weighs less than 5 pounds. It's $14.99. I'm not saying this thing is the most optimal buy, especially if you're sensitive to display quality. Only 230 nits, 61% sRGB color gamut. And the contrast ratio is good. If you're a casual gamer and you don't care about display quality that much, that's the biggest reason you'd want to get this. If you didn't care about display quality and you want a higher tier GPU, you want the 4070 instead of the 4060. You're basically saying, I don't care about the display quality. I'd rather get the higher tier GPU. This thing's going to be a great gaming laptop for a college student that doesn't care about the display quality as much, that's going to use an external display. I guess the battery life's not great, probably because it's only 53 watt hours. That'd not make it as good for a college student, I guess. It'd be okay for college students. I don't know. The keyboard felt good to type on. The backlight does look good and everything's illuminated, including the secondary key functions. And you do have a number pad. There's no Windows Hello on this guy. For software, the MSI software is going to work fine, I think. For battery life, you're looking between 3 to 5 hours, depending on how you optimize it. Maybe a little less if you don't optimize it at all for just like web browsing. Please remove porridge from the camera. LOL. Probably a VA panel if ghosting. Yeah, it's not a great panel. Definitely not a great panel. And so if you're sensitive to wanting a high quality display, skip this laptop and go for the Pulse 15 or another brand like the Strix G16 or Zephyrus G16, something else. Maybe an Acer Nitro 5. I went over a lot of different comparable laptops at the start of the stream. So go back to that section if you want a good look at some potential options. You can check the laptop list here for if you want to shop around for different options. The person who wants to buy this wants to maximize their GPU, CUDA cores, and potential like frame generation performance. Versus say buying an RTX 3000 series. The person who buys this is not going to care as much about the display quality, brightness, or color gamut. Maybe because they're going to use an external display most of the time, or they just, like I said, they just don't care about the display quality as much. They would rather have the graphical performance and future proofing. For 1080p gaming, this thing's going to crush it, I think. The 1080p games, it's going to do really well. You're going to be able to play 1080p games without any problems. QHD gaming, it was also still above 60 FPS in the 3 AAA games that we tested. And I'm pretty sure you're going to get over 144 FPS at QHD and a lot of esports games, maybe even 240 Hertz in QHD with this RTX 4070. It's a very powerful GPU for the money. And I think that's a good summary of this laptop. This laptop is chock full of graphical potential and it's going to make a lot of people happy. I don't necessarily think it's going to be the best buy for most people. I think something with a better display is going to be the better buy for more people. But I still think people are going to be happy with this laptop, or a lot of people will be happy with this laptop. I guess that's my summary of the Katana. It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag, and if you're okay with the parts that are meh, go for it. If you're not okay with the parts that are meh, go for another one. That's my summary of it. You know, it's It's not terrible. I would recommend, in general, I would recommend other laptops over this one. So that's my summary of the Katana 15. Do I recommend it? Yes, but with major caveats. It's for the person that wants the highest tier GPU for the lowest price and who doesn't care about display quality. That's like if I were to summarize it in one sentence. But in general, I do think there are better options out there at $1,500. And I think it'd be worth sacrificing not buying the 4070 and going with a 4060 instead for that better display quality. Okay? That's my review of the Katana, basically. I think this might be the only video I make on it because I've got a lot of other laptops I've got to focus on. And yeah, I hope this is helpful for anyone that's shopping around and trying to decide if they're going to go with the Katana or not.